Welcome to a world of stories where every word helps you relax and drift off to sleep. Don't forget to leave your positive feedback because by the end of our tale, you'll be sweetly dreaming. Close your eyes and let's begin our journey into the past. Picture a vast desert stretching to the horizon. The air shimmers above the scorching sands, and in the distance, you can see the silhouettes of a large caravan. Camels move slowly, burdened with precious goods, vibrant fabrics, rare spices and jewels. Merchants walk alongside, carefully scanning the horizon. Many days lie ahead to reach the nearest oasis, with only heat and emptiness surrounding them. This image is familiar to many from films and books, but it's worth considering that caravans crossing deserts and mountains for centuries brought not only goods, but also exchanged ideas, religion, and technology, forever altering the fates of civilizations. The Silk Road spanned thousands of kilometers, linking China, India, Central Asia, Persia, Arab lands, and Europe. Today, we'll explore the journeys of people and ideas, the crossroads of great civilizations, and remarkable discoveries. The beginning of the Silk Road is a story filled with dramatic events, bold actions, and unexpected findings. It all started in the 1st century BCE in ancient China during the Han Dynasty. China was already a powerful empire but faced constant attacks from northern nomads known as the Xiongnu. Emperor Wu devised an ambitious plan to find allies in the west to weaken or distract the nomads. For this challenging mission, he chose a diplomat and explorer named Zhang Qian. In 130 BCE, Zhang Qian set off on a perilous journey with a small group of warriors and guides. Their path was incredibly tough. Almost immediately, they fell into captivity among the nomads, and Zhang Qian spent a whole decade in captivity. However, he didn't break. Instead, he studied the customs and lifestyle of the nomads while preparing for escape. Finally, he managed to flee and reach the lands of Central Asia, where he encountered extraordinary cities and states that Chinese people had never imagined. Among them were wealthy nations like Bactria, Sogdiana, and Parthia, which thrived due to trade with the West. The Chinese diplomat was amazed by what he saw: developed cities with fortifications, bustling markets, exquisite goods, and most importantly, an entirely different culture. This was a real culture shock for him and for an empire that had long been isolated in its worldview. Zhang Qian realized that establishing stable connections with these lands would not only provide allies against the nomads, but also significantly expand China's trade and cultural exchanges, enriching it with goods and knowledge from other civilizations. His discovery of a new world became a key result of the mission and paved the way for the future development of the Silk Road. After long travels, Zhang Qian reported back to the emperor about everything he had seen. He spoke of fertile lands, powerful states, and incredible opportunities that connections with Central Asia and the West could open for China. Although trade and routes didn't develop immediately, by around the 1st century CE, the process of creating permanent paths began. However, diplomatic and trade relations couldn't develop peacefully, while wars with the Xiongnu continued. The conflict was so severe that the Han Dynasty's army launched several campaigns into Central Asia to displace the Xiongnu and establish control over crucial oases. The struggle for Fergana was particularly significant. A flourishing valley in Central Asia, now part of modern Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, and Tajikistan, known for its fine horses. Fergana horses were considered a marvel of nature. The Chinese believed these horses could bring victory in battles and good fortune. Thus, control over Fergana was vital not only strategically, but also symbolically, affirming the emperor's greatness and the strength of the Chinese army. The Tarim Basin also became a hot spot for conflicts. This vast area in northwestern modern China is surrounded by rugged mountains. At the center lies the lifeless Taklamakan Desert, one of the most inhospitable in the world. However, on its edges, there were oasis cities that saved travelers' lives. The Tarim Basin was crucial since several trade routes intersected here, making control highly profitable. Without the oases, caravans couldn't survive, as they provided water, food, and safe resting places. Therefore, a constant struggle ensued for control over Tarim. Eventually, the Han Empire established control over the oases, which helped stabilize future trade routes. The path began in the ancient Chinese city of Chang'an and stretched westward, crossing deserts and climbing mountains, reaching the wealthy cities of Central Asia. Then the routes branched out. Some led to Persia and India, while others continued to more distant regions. The most famous commodity became Chinese silk, regarded as a true treasure. But besides silk, Chinese merchants also exported lacquerware, bronze items, and jade ornaments. Thanks to the bravery of Zhang Qian and his discovery of new lands, an era began that changed the course of world history. When the caravan routes became more stable and secure, the Silk Road flourished. By the beginning of our era, trade had turned into a regular and profitable process, uniting territories from the Great Wall of China to distant frontiers. In the West, the borders of the Roman Empire remained far from China. Despite the lack of direct contact between China and Rome, both civilizations actively exchanged goods through a chain of intermediaries. From China, not only renowned silk fabrics, but also exquisite lacquerware, gleaming bronze mirrors, jade artifacts, rice paper, as well as exotic spices and medicinal herbs flowed westward. Conversely, equally valuable goods traveled eastward. Through the Indian Ocean and with intermediaries in India, the Chinese obtained famous Arabian incense and aromatic oils, highly valued at the emperor's court. Roman glassware, gold and silver jewelry, wine, and olive oil primarily reached Central Asia, where they were seen as rarities and symbols of wealth. In China, such items were regarded as unique and accessible only to the highest aristocracy. However, what most interested the Chinese were the famed Fergana horses. Yet, the Romans didn't know who produced silk, and the Chinese had never encountered real Romans. Trade occurred exclusively through intermediaries, akin to modern brokers. These were peoples who knew the routes well and could communicate effectively with all parties. In this process, the peoples of Sogdiana and Parthia played a crucial role. The Sogdians, living in territories corresponding to modern Uzbekistan and Tajikistan, were outstanding merchants and diplomats. They spoke multiple languages and dialects, negotiated skillfully, and navigated the complex network of trade routes through mountainous areas and deserts. Their trading colonies sprang up in major oasis cities, what contributed to the creation of an efficient trade network connecting different cultures and states. The Parthians, whose empire spanned modern-day Iran and parts of Iraq, controlled the western section of the Silk Road. They not only ensured the safety of routes from bandits, but also deliberately obstructed direct contacts between China and Rome, protecting their intermediary positions. This allowed them to reap significant profits from trade, which sometimes led to military conflicts. In 53 BCE, during the famous Battle of Carrhae, the Parthians defeated Roman forces, marking an important political victory and further strengthening their influence over Eastern trade. Roman emperors and aristocrats became so enamored with Chinese silk that it sparked serious political disagreements. The Roman historian Pliny the Elder expressed dissatisfaction with Rome losing gold for Eastern luxuries. In Roman society, there were even bans on wearing fine silk fabrics, deemed too transparent and immoral, corrupting traditional Roman morals. However, no prohibitions could halt trade. Silk became so valuable that its worth sometimes equated to gold, and cities along the Silk Road flourished and prospered. Interestingly, not only goods traveled along the Silk Road. Caravans transported prisoners and slaves, becoming part of a complex international exchange. Alongside the caravans, diseases also traveled. In the 1st century CE, a terrible epidemic known as the Antonine Plague spread to Europe via the Silk Road routes. It's believed to have been smallpox, claiming millions of lives in the Roman Empire and marking the first global experience of disease spreading through international trade routes. By the 3rd century CE, the Silk Road had become not just a route for goods, but also a vital artery for ideas and religions. India, one of the world's oldest civilizations, played a key role in cultural and economic exchanges along the Silk Road. This country was known for its wealth. Caravans loaded with spices, black pepper, cinnamon, cloves, and turmeric, departed from its ports and cities to the north and west. These spices symbolized wealth and luxury in various societies, from the Chinese court to Roman elites. Some spices, like cloves, initially arrived in India from distant Maluku Islands, but India became the main hub from which these goods spread worldwide. Additionally, India was a leading global center for precious stones like sapphires, rubies, and emeralds, valued along the entire trade route. Cotton textiles, light, bright, and durable, also traveled from India east and west, gradually gaining immense popularity among merchants and consumers. Indian cotton became particularly significant for Central Asia, effectively competing with silk and wool due to its affordability and practicality. However, perhaps the most significant contribution of India to the Silk Road was its ideas and beliefs. Buddhism originated here, a religion preaching compassion, spiritual enlightenment, and liberation from suffering. From the early centuries CE, Buddhist missionaries left Indian monasteries, heading north and east along caravan routes to spread their teachings to distant regions. These traveling monks established numerous monasteries and temples throughout the Silk Road. Oases in the desert and mountain passes, once mere way stations, gradually became vibrant cultural centers. Merchants and travelers stopped at monasteries not just for rest and lodging, but also to learn about a new religion, receive education, or obtain medical care. The spread of Buddhism also received support from powerful rulers and local elites. For example, the Kushan Empire, existing in Central Asia and northern India during the 1st to 3rd centuries CE, actively patronized Buddhism, building temples, financing monasteries, and promoting its spread far beyond its borders. Thanks to the Kushans, Buddhism gained a powerful boost in Central Asia, later penetrating China. By the 5th century, Buddhism had firmly established itself in China, particularly flourishing during the period of instability known as the era of the Northern and Southern dynasties. During this time, traditional Chinese teachings, Confucianism and Taoism temporarily weakened. Buddhism, offering a path of salvation and comfort in difficult times, quickly became a new spiritual support for millions of Chinese, from ordinary peasants to members of the imperial family. Buddhist monasteries emerged as centers of science, education, and culture, where sacred texts were translated and copied, and magnificent artworks and sculptures reflecting Indian motifs and Chinese traditions were created simultaneously. Additionally, Buddhist monks significantly contributed to the development of trade. They were not only preachers but also scholars, translators, and diplomats, capable of establishing peaceful relations even between warring peoples, uniting them around a common spiritual tradition. Often, it was the monks who accompanied caravans, protecting travelers with their authority and diplomatic skills. Indian teachers and missionaries also journeyed further east to Korea and Japan, spreading Buddhist ideas far beyond their native continent. Simultaneously, other religions actively spread along the Silk Road, notably Zoroastrianism, Manichaeism, and Christianity. This religious spectrum created a unique tapestry of belief diversity and led to sharp conflicts over the struggle for influence over trade routes and local powers. Zoroastrianism, one of the oldest religions, arose in Persian lands and was founded by the prophet Zoroaster. The key idea of Zoroastrianism revolved around the opposition of good and evil, light and darkness, represented by two divine entities, Ahura Mazda, the god of light, and Angra Mainyu, the god of darkness. Followers of this faith believed that every human action impacts the harmony in this endless struggle. During the peak of the Silk Road, Zoroastrianism actively spread in Central Asia, especially among Iranian peoples and merchants from Sogdiana, for whom this religion became an essential spiritual support. Zoroastrian temples and places of worship emerged in oases like Bukhara and Samarkand, quickly becoming significant cultural and religious centers, although their traces remain only partially. Manichaeism, a religion that appeared in the 3rd century in Persia and was founded by the prophet Mani, represented an even more vivid yet controversial doctrine. It combined elements of Christianity, Buddhism, and Zoroastrianism, asserting that the world is divided into two opposing principles: spirit and matter, light and darkness. This doctrine proved so appealing that it quickly attracted a multitude of followers in Central Asia and penetrated China as well. Manichaeism spread particularly actively in China during the 7th century under the Tang dynasty, receiving temporary support from the imperial court. However, its success led to tensions and conflicts with Buddhist and Zoroastrian communities. Buddhist monks accused Manichaeans of borrowing their ideas, while Zoroastrian priests considered them heretics, threatening traditional beliefs. Conflicts sometimes resulted in open confrontations, exiles of Manichaeans from major cities, and the destruction of their shrines. Economic interests also played a role alongside Manichaeism, since Manichaean merchants controlled significant trade routes and competed with other communities for profitable paths. Christianity significantly contributed to the religious diversity along the Silk Road. Starting in the 2nd century, Christian missionaries from the Church of the East actively operated along trade routes. However, the widespread adoption of Nestorianism in Central Asia and China became noticeable only in the 6th century. Nestorian communities thrived, receiving support from local rulers who viewed Christians as not only spiritual guides, but also educated translators and diplomats. Christian priests corresponded and negotiated with influential emperors and khans, maintaining trade connections and enhancing their community's influence. However, conflicts sometimes arose. Buddhists, fearing competition, viewed Christian communities as rivals. Relations were particularly tense in cities where Christian temples coexisted with Buddhist monasteries. Each community sought the support of local nobility and merchants, ensuring both spiritual influence and control over the region's economy. Local conflicts, temple destructions, and disputes over patronage of powerful rulers occasionally erupted. Amid these events, Jewish trading communities thrived, especially in cities like Bukhara and Samarkand, populated by numerous Jewish merchants and artisans. These communities not only engaged in trade, but also enriched the region's cultural life with their traditions and beliefs, adding to the Silk Road's diversity. By the end of the period under discussion in the 6th century, Islam was already on the horizon, poised to significantly alter the religious landscape of Central Asia and displace many previous beliefs. Unique works of art emerged in this vibrant and complex cultural synthesis, marked by the struggle and mutual influence of various religions. Examples of wall paintings in Penjikent, located in modern-day Tajikistan, beautifully illustrate the blend of Buddhist, Zoroastrian, and local motifs. The religions spreading along the Silk Road not only influenced people's beliefs, but also significantly changed the appearance of cities and the lifestyles of entire societies. One of the most notable manifestations of this process was the emergence of monasteries and cultural centers along trade routes. Initially, monasteries served as simple havens for missionary monks, but soon evolved into fully developed spiritual, educational, and cultural centers. They fulfilled various functions. Caravans would stop to rest, exchange information, and share culture. Sacred texts were copied here, philosophical and medical works were translated, scientific research took place, and magnificent works of art were created. This process was especially evident in the Tarim Basin oases and the mountainous regions of Central Asia, where famous cave complexes were located. One of the most impressive examples was the cave situated at the intersection of key trade routes leading to China. Starting in the 1st century CE, the first caves were carved out. However, the true flourishing of construction and painting occurred in the 6th century, when hundreds of artificially created caves transformed into grand temples and libraries. The walls and ceilings of these caves featured stunning paintings depicting scenes from Buddha's life and legends of monks traveling to distant India for knowledge and sacred texts. Gradually, the caves became a unique cultural center along the Silk Road. Thousands of manuscripts in various languages, from Sanskrit and Chinese to Sogdian and Uyghur, were stored in monastery libraries, creating an unparalleled archive of knowledge from that era. A particularly famous cache of manuscripts discovered in the early 20th century contained unique documents from the late 10th and early 11th centuries. These manuscripts remain preserved here for centuries, allowing the world access to invaluable evidence of cultural exchange between East and West. Thanks to the efforts of Buddhist monks, hundreds of treatises on philosophy, medicine, astronomy, and geography were preserved and translated, without which the modern world would hardly grasp the culture of ancient Asia. However, such centers of spirituality and science didn't only emerge in Dunhuang. Monastic centers developed throughout the trade route. Thanks to monasteries, cities gradually transformed, becoming important hubs of enlightenment and spiritual life. Temples appeared on main streets, street vendors offered ritual items and images of saints, and townspeople increasingly turned to the teachings of Buddhist, Zoroastrian, or Christian priests for spiritual advice and assistance. These changes affected not only architecture and the appearance of cities, but also the thinking and mentality of their inhabitants. While merchants once primarily aimed for profit and successful transactions, spiritual life began to play a significant role. People increasingly contemplated morality, compassion, and mercy, largely influenced by the spread of Buddhist and Christian ideas. To maintain their reputation and status, many generously donated funds for building temples and monasteries, financed the copying of sacred texts, and assisted the needy and sick. In the 6th century, a new force emerged on the historical stage: the Arabs, who brought Islam with them. This new religion and empire forever altered the region's landscape. The Arab conquests, which began on the Arabian Peninsula, rapidly spread beyond it. By the mid-6th century, Arab armies had conquered territories that comprise modern Iran, and by the early 7th century, they reached Central Asia, where the most crucial trading cities were located. Initially, the Arabs faced fierce resistance from local rulers and principalities. However, their powerful military organization and clear religious ideology allowed them to gain the upper hand relatively quickly. A key event was the Battle of Talas in 751 CE, where Arab forces defeated the Chinese army, solidifying their influence in the region and ending Chinese dominance in Central Asia. From that moment, Islam began to spread slowly among the local population, first among rulers and urban elites, and then gradually reaching ordinary townsfolk. Rural populations accepted the new faith much more slowly. Over time, Islam became the leading religion in the region, displacing or integrating previous beliefs and traditions. The Islamization of trade routes occurred steadily but surely. By the 9th century, most oasis cities had adopted a predominantly Muslim character. These cities, which had previously thrived through trade, experienced a true flourishing under the Arabs. Samarkand and Bukhara became major centers of science, religion, and commerce, symbolizing a new era. Majestic mosques, religious educational institutions, and markets sprang up around central squares, where goods from all corners of the world could be purchased. Bukhara became especially famous as a spiritual and educational center of the Islamic world. Outstanding scholars, theologians, and philosophers worked here, creating unique libraries with tens of thousands of books and manuscripts. In Samarkand, an ancient city rich in history, Islam intertwined organically with local Sogdian and Persian traditions, creating a unique cultural atmosphere. Kashgar, located in the east on the border of China and Central Asia, became a vital trading hub on the route to China, where Islam gradually took a dominant position. However, the highest flourishing of Islamic culture occurred during the Abbasid Caliphate. That governed from Baghdad became the new capital of the Muslim world. In the 9th century, Baghdad emerged as the largest city globally, boasting a population of 1 million people and becoming a true intellectual hub. Here, ancient works that nearly vanished in Europe after the fall of the Roman Empire were actively translated and studied. Thanks to Arab translators, the world preserved essential writings of Aristotle, Plato, Ptolemy, and Euclid. Later, during the Middle Ages, Europe rediscovered its ancient heritage through the Arab world, aided by contacts in Spain and the Crusades, laying the foundation for its cultural and scientific revival. Scholars in Baghdad and Khorasan, the largest center in eastern modern Iran and Afghanistan, significantly advanced medicine, mathematics, astronomy, and geography. They founded a renowned Academy of Wisdom, where great minds like mathematician Al-Khwarizmi, the author of the first systematic textbook on algebra, worked. Centuries later, the remarkable physician Avicenna lived in the same region, whose medical treatises influenced medicine worldwide for centuries. Thus, Arab conquests and the spread of Islam profoundly shaped the cultural, scientific, and commercial flourishing of the trade route. However, Arab dominance along this route extended beyond merely spreading religion and knowledge. Arabs became a crucial link between the East and the Mediterranean, controlling key trade routes and regulating exchange between distant regions. After the Battle of Talas in 751 BCE, Arabs couldn't establish direct control over China, but successfully initiated trade with Chinese cities via intermediary principalities in Central Asia, such as Kashgar and Khotan. Arab merchants and diplomats also forged strong ties with India and East Africa, connecting their goods to the markets of the Middle East and the Mediterranean. It was Arab caravans that brought Chinese silk, Indian spices, Persian carpets, and Central Asian textiles to Syria and Egypt, from where these goods spread throughout the Mediterranean world, reaching Byzantium, North Africa, and Europe. In the opposite direction, glassware, jewelry, and wine traveled along the same routes, eventually reaching Central Asia and even China through Baghdad and Khorasan. Arab merchants became conduits of cultural traditions and knowledge. Arabic emerged as the language of international trade and science, allowing merchants and scholars from various corners of Eurasia to communicate freely and exchange information. Beyond ordinary goods and knowledge, a vast number of people, slaves, also moved along the trade route. Slavery was an integral part of commerce at that time and served as a significant source of income. Slaves were bought and sold in major markets in Samarkand and Bukhara, and in the west, in Aleppo and Damascus, from where they dispersed throughout the Muslim world. Most of the enslaved were captives taken during wars and raids on nomadic tribes in Central Asia and the Caucasus. Young men and women from Turkic and Slavic tribes, known for their physical strength and beauty, were highly valued. Additionally, a large flow of slaves originated from East Africa, exported through the ports of Aden and Baghdad to Middle Eastern cities. The use of slaves was diverse. They worked as domestic servants and concubines, as well as in heavy construction, artisanal workshops, plantations, and agriculture, which held immense economic significance. The scale of slavery was substantial. In the 8th century, this even triggered one of the largest uprisings in Islamic history, the Zhang Rebellion in Iraq, Rebel slaves from East Africa controlled vast territories for nearly 15 years, posing a serious threat to the central authority of the caliphate. The slave trade and mass exploitation of slave labor transformed the demographic and cultural landscape of entire regions, such as Iraq, Syria, and Egypt. The enormous influx of slaves contributed to the formation of military castes known as Ghulams and Mamluks, consisting of freed and converted Muslim slaves. These castes gained so much power that the Mamluks even seized control in Egypt in the 13th century, establishing their own sultanate and dramatically altering the political map of the Middle East for years. In the 13th century, the history of the trade route drastically changed due to one of the greatest empires in human history, the Mongol Empire, founded by the legendary Genghis Khan. In the early 13th century, Mongol tribes inhabited the vast steppes north of China and engaged in constant conflicts among themselves. In 1206, a young and determined warrior named Temujin united most Mongol tribes, earning the title Genghis Khan, meaning Great Khan. Under his command, the Mongol army transformed into a powerful military force, soon launching a massive assault on neighboring states. The early years of Mongol conquest were marked by horrific destruction and mass casualties. In 1219, Genghis Khan's troops invaded Central Asia, confronting the wealthiest oasis cities thriving on trade. The charismatic Mongol warriors became a real catastrophe for many local settlements. Samarkand, Bukhara, Urgench, and other prosperous trading centers were captured and nearly completely destroyed. Legends say that the streets of Bukhara ran with blood to the extent that horses slipped on the pavements, and after the fall of Urgench, the Mongols deliberately demolished the dam, flooding its ruins and rendering them uninhabitable for many years. The devastation affected not only Central Asia. Mongol forces continued westward, conquering Persia, Mesopotamia, Georgia, Armenia, northern China, and even Russian principalities. In many of these regions, entire areas were devastated. Populations were either exterminated or enslaved. Historical sources describe how, after Mongol attacks, entire provinces became desolate wastelands, littered with ashes and the bones of the dead. Nevertheless, despite the brutality of the initial conquests, the situation began to change after Genghis Khan's death in 1227. His successors continued the expansion, creating a state of immense size that encompassed lands from China in the east to Eastern Europe in the west, and from Siberia in the north to India in the south. This vast empire, unified under the descendants of Genghis Khan, provided unprecedented stability and security along the trade routes. Thus began a period that historians later referred to as the Mongol Peace. This golden age of the Silk Road lasted roughly from the mid-13th to the mid-14th century. The Mongol Khans recognized that the prosperity of trade brought them as much wealth as conquests. They began to restore cities, roads, and bridges destroyed during the initial wars and strictly suppressed any attempts to attack caravans. Throughout the vast empire, a unique security system known as the Yam was established. This network of guarded postal and trading stations allowed travelers to rest, change horses, and receive protection from bandits. Laws. The Mongols harshly punished bandits, creating conditions for nearly free movement of caravans. This gave a significant boost to trade and cultural exchange. For the first time in ages, merchants could safely travel from China to the Black Sea and beyond, without fearing robberies and attacks that had once been commonplace. Mongol rulers attracted talented individuals, regardless of their background or religion. Many Muslim, Chinese, and European traders, diplomats, and craftsmen held high positions at Mongol courts, becoming part of this international imperial elite. Thus, despite the initial brutality of conquests, Mongol Khans restored trade routes and significantly expanded their scale and opportunities. As a result, the Silk Road flourished. The era of Mongol peace unified remote regions of Eurasia into a single trade and cultural network, creating unprecedented conditions for the exchange of goods, people, and knowledge. During the Mongol Golden Age, the Silk Road became not just a grand artery of trade, but also a route for famous travelers, diplomats, and scholars who left detailed accounts of their adventures. One of the most renowned was Marco Polo, a merchant from Venice, Italy. In the late 12th century, he embarked on an extraordinary journey through the Mongol Empire with his father and uncle. Marco Polo spent nearly 17 years at the court of the great Khan Kublai in China. Although he wasn't an official diplomat, the Khan entrusted him with private missions, allowing Marco to deeply explore the life and customs of Mongol China. Upon returning home, he vividly described distant lands, their wealth, customs, and traditions. His book, known as the Book of the Marvels of the World or the Travels of Marco Polo, became the first serious source of knowledge for Europeans about the East, shaping their perceptions of distant countries for centuries. Another important traveler was William of Rubruck, a Franciscan monk sent by French King Louis IX in 1253 to the lands of the Mongols to establish diplomatic ties and convert them to Christianity. Rubruck journeyed through Central Asia to the Mongol capital of Karakorum, where he met with the great Khan Monke. Although his mission failed, Rubruck left detailed records about the life and customs of the Mongols, as well as their religious practices. Another notable traveler, but from the opposite end of the Silk Road, was Ibn Battuta, a prominent Arab geographer and traveler from Morocco. In the 14th century, he undertook a grand journey that spanned nearly all of Eurasia, from North Africa to India and China. His accounts are filled with incredible descriptions of cities, oases, and peoples he encountered along the way. Ibn Battuta visited major trading and cultural centers of the Silk Road, detailing Islamic customs, educational institutions, and local justice systems. Because of his works, historians gained unique insights into life and culture along the caravan routes of that time. Along with travelers on the Silk Road, new knowledge and technology spread, changing the world. Among the most significant were the compass, paper, and gunpowder, all originally developed in China. However, paper reached the Muslim world much earlier, following the famous Battle of Talas in 751, when Chinese paper makers fell into Arab captivity. Mass production of paper began in Samarkand in the 8th and 9th centuries, and then spread further west. The compass made its way to Europe by the 12th century, but widespread use in navigation began later. Gunpowder, although known earlier, spread actively during the Mongol era and became widely used in Europe from the 15th century onward, forever altering warfare and facilitating the advent of firearms. However, the Silk Road sometimes brought terrible threats alongside goods, ideas, and technologies. One such threat was the plague epidemic known as the Black Death. Modern genetic studies confirm its origin in Central Asia in the early 14th century. Thanks to the stability of trade routes and safety of travel, the disease quickly spread along caravan trails westward through Central Asia and the Middle East, reaching the ports of the Black and Mediterranean Seas and then into Europe. This illness claimed millions of lives, decimating up to half the population of some European cities and radically altering society and the economy of Europe. By the early 14th century, the Silk Road gradually began to decline. The famous system of trade routes connecting East and West for centuries lost its significance due to the emergence of more convenient and profitable sea routes opened by European explorers. The reasons for this decline began to develop long before the 15th century. By the 10th century, the Mongol Empire had fragmented, leading to a loss of unified control and security on caravan routes. Cities in Central Asia suffered greatly from the devastating raids of Tamerlane, who, despite promoting cultural development in Samarkand, inflicted significant damage on other cities and their trade networks. Additionally, the Black Death had a massive impact on regions and populations, severely affecting trade and destroying previous economic connections. However, the main reason was that maritime trade proved to be much cheaper, safer, and faster. Transporting goods by caravans through dangerous deserts and mountains required significant time and financial resources. While ships could carry a much larger volume of cargo at lower costs, the risk of attacks on them was significantly lower than on long overland routes. A key event that changed the global trading landscape was Portuguese explorer Vasco da Gama's discovery of the sea route from Europe to India in 1498. This opened direct access to rich Asian markets for Europeans, bypassing Muslim and Italian intermediaries. Simultaneously with Vasco da Gama, other European explorers sought alternative routes to Asia. In 1492, Christopher Columbus headed west and discovered America, mistakenly believing it to be India. These discoveries forever changed global trade and marked the beginning of the age of exploration. The decline of the Silk Road accelerated with the Ottoman Empire, which established control over key straits and land routes in the Middle East by the mid-15th century. In 1453, the Ottomans captured Constantinople, sharply limiting trade with Europe, increasing tariffs, and complicating passage through their lands. Although trade didn't cease completely, its costs significantly rose, and travel safety declined. This prompted Europeans to actively seek new maritime routes independent of the Ottomans. By the late 16th century, once thriving trading cities in Central Asia gradually lost their significance as international trade centers. Nevertheless, Samarkand and Bukhara didn't disappear entirely. Under the rule of the Timurids and later the Shaybanids, they maintained their status as major commercial hubs. Cultural, religious, and educational centers existed, but their significance as key trade hubs greatly diminished. Caravans continued along old routes in the 16th and 17th centuries, but the Silk Road wasn't the world's main trade artery anymore. Its role gradually shifted to the sea and ocean trade routes opened by Europeans. Expansion and colonization, as well as the creation of global empires, largely stemmed from the experience of international trade and cultural exchange built over centuries on the Silk Road. Thus, while the era of great caravans ended, the legacy of the Silk Road lived on in new maritime routes, discoveries, and global trade that fundamentally transformed the world.